Hi and welcome to Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem and today I'm bringing you one of our new goddess collections. We're going to be working with Persephone. She's the Greek goddess of spring, of everlasting love. So I've gone a little bit heart themed for today's project. Let's head down to the board and get creating together. Persephone being the Greek goddess of spring, she's associated with Narcissi. And one of the pieces in here which is exquisite for my mind are these beautiful bead caps, which are a little bit inspired, I like to think, by the flowers of spring. In terms of colours, we've got overriding tones of red and the most beautiful purples as well over some of these crystals. You've got some fancy boho beads, you've got this absolutely giant bead down at the centre there, the beautiful black hearts, reds and just stunning colours on these fancy beads as well. Why don't we make a start on our project today? I'll just pop Goddess Persephone up in the corner. This is the design that we're going to be working with. So being the goddess of empathy, everlasting love and kindness, I thought we could have a little bit of a heart motif. Now the size of the heart at the base of the pendant is absolutely up to you. I've gone quite large on the red one and a little bit more diminutive on the monochrome design. But obviously you can choose whatever size you want to work with. I'll be working with a medium wire. I have around about 12 inches of 18 gauge. If it's a terribly soft wire, I would recommend giving that a little bit of a run through with a wire smoother, which also acts as a way that you can firm that wire up, or just choose yourself a nice medium temper wire to work with. We're going to begin by creating a spiral. So let's check that we have flush cut the end of the wire there. Let's just get that away. You can use your round nose pliers, your multi-step bail makers, or your memory wire pliers to create that little round form, which is where we're starting off. So we've got best part of a circular form, but you'll notice that I don't completely finish the circle. I just let the wire come a little bit wide before switching over to my favourite flat facing pliers. And then I close that circle up and start pushing that into my non-dominant hand. Now I think what I'll do today is to make a slightly smaller piece. I'm working with a copper colour wire, but you could obviously go for whatever colour makes your heart happy. Once I've got a couple of circles around that central aperture, I'm just going to warm that through very, very softly. I'm going to begin to create a third circuit around that central point, but just allowing that to come away so that there's a bit of a gap. And you can create that really evenly, or you can create it where the spiral gap gets just a little bit larger. The main thing is we're creating a spiral. You could have one or two circuits around the centre, but the final circuit needs to be open, and the reason for that will become apparent. So let's just create that third circuit all the way open around. And what we're going to do is just flip that over for a second. Now I'm going to use the warmth of my thumb to just draw that wire round in a little bit of an arc and down to an imaginary point at the base of the heart. So we're going to use that opening spiral as half of the heart design. Then we're going to create a point down at the base and push the wire back up and over towards the spiral we've created before opening that wire back again. And the reason we do that is that we get a little bit of a sharper point down at the base. Again, let's warm that wire through, and then there are two ways you can create the other side of the heart. You can either use a round form such as a dowel or your multi-step bail making pliers, or you can again use the curvature and warmth of your thumb. So I'm just going to warm that wire through and then just gently wiggle it until I get something that looks a bit similar to the second side of the heart. Now it doesn't need to be perfect. Hearts are asymmetrical in a lot of designs. It's very, very popular to have an asymmetrical heart. So if you want to go completely asymmetric, you do whatever suits you best. Once I've got the second lobe of my heart, I'm going to create a line that comes away from that central point known as the cleavage. We're going to grip that wire just before it reaches that opening spiral. I'm just going to pull that up and away, I'm very, very tightly holding on with my pliers and then using a little bit of pressure with my hand to create that bend. So what we want to happen is for that wire to come away at 12 o'clock. If you put the design onto an imaginary line, or like I have on my board, an actual line, really, really helpful thing to have. What we want to have is a straight line coming up from that central point. I don't want to put too much pressure into the design. I just want to make sure that that central section is nice and firm. Now, a lot of designs, you could simply leave it like that, or you could hammer it, but today we're going to wire it together. So I'm going to grab some additional wire. This is 26 gauge round wire, and this is soft or medium, it doesn't really matter. What we're going to do is just grab a hold of the design, and we're going to start looking at the side that has the spiral on it. We're going to ignore the side that's open and look at the spiral just here. I'm going to lay that wire over the top. The finer gauge wire goes over the top by around about an inch or so. And what I'm going to do now is to make a coil around the side of the heart that leads down to the point where that spiral is. So if I just push that around, start by circling quite lazily and then build up a bit of tension. Now I want it to be able to move around, so I'm not going to use an additional tool to help me with that until the very end. I'm just going to continue circling away. It's around about an inch, could be a little bit more if you like the idea of having that wire spiralling around, or it could be a little bit less, but you need a minimum of about 3 or 4 rotations of that finer gauge wire. Now when you get towards the end, you may find that there's a little sticky uppy bit. You can just see it glinting in the light there. We definitely want that to be nice and smooth. So my trick for this is to put the pliers over that spiral gently and move them around until that's nice and flush. You can also see that I've allowed that wire to spiral around lazily. We actually want to tighten that up. So another tip for you, using your flat facing pliers, I'm using my bent chain nose pliers. I'm going to put one tip of the pliers on top of the heavier wire frame and at the right hand side, and then the other tip of my pliers on the outside of the frame at the left hand side, and then very, very softly draw those together without pinching your fingertips preferably, and you'll find that you can create a really nice neat spiral or coil around that core, just tightening that up. Once you're happy that that's nice and positioned lovely, what we're going to do is push that all the way around until that coil meets the central core wire. I'm just going to flip this over and pull it underneath that core wire so that I've got my spiral of wire coming away, and then I'm going to wrap 3 times around both the outermost section of that opening spiral and the core wire up at the centre. So if I just bring that slightly closer for a second, we're going to take the wire so that it wraps around both the spiral and the core 3 times. And there's a couple of ways that you can do this. You can bring the wire over the top. I brought the finer gauge wire over the top, and I'm just going to poke it down inside the outermost section of that opening spiral. So push that all the way down and draw that very, very carefully so that you don't kink the wire, nice and firmly. What we're looking to have happen is to draw the outermost opening spiral and the core wire firmly together. What we don't want is for one to sit on top or underneath. We want them to be sat side by side. So there is a technique where you can bring this wire over the top and loop it around the opening spiral. It's quite tricky. I don't want to show it to you today because it might get a little bit confusing. So we're going to continue to poke that wire through the outermost spiral, draw that all the way down, pull that firmly into position. So we've got tension, and we've got a second band of wire drawing the core and the outermost section of the spiral together. Let's go for a third, making sure that these wires don't bundle over each other. They're banding neatly together. Again, take the end of the wire down and through the outermost spiral, pull that firmly into position across the back, and then we're going to push that down into the middle of the heart form. And then we're going to rotate the same number of times as we started with. So let's have a look. It makes sense if you can count them, but if you didn't count them, I'd estimate there's probably about 7 there. So we'll count this time. That's 3. That's a 4th turn. Pushing each time that you band the wire around. That's a 5th time. a 6th time. If you don't want to use your nails, you can very, very gently grip your pliers and just push that spiral up together. And then the last time, as long as they look vaguely similar, it will balance itself out. So I'm going to finish off by bringing the wire to the inside of the heart-shaped frame. Let's find my flush cutters. Trim that away with just a teeny tiny amount of spare wire. You see that straight bit at the top there? And again, I'm going to employ the same technique, which is to put my pliers over the surface and rotate them around. And what will happen is that sticky uppy bit will become a lie downy bit. So we've got our heart section all ready to rock and roll. Now you can play around. If you want a bit more of a point on your heart, you can do a little bit of fun twisting like so. And what I'm doing is I'm very gently twisting that so that you get a bit more of a point accentuated down at the base of the heart. You can play around with the shape to your heart's content. Let's smooth away the rest of that core wire. So you can choose whichever beads you fancy. I really liked the idea of having a heart on a heart, so I've done that on the monochrome look. A stack of reds on this one. It's got a spiral on the back of the wrapped loop here. And then it's a basic flat wrapped loop on the other one. So it's with whichever way you think you'd like to see that happen. The only proviso is that you can get your 18 gauge wire through those gaps. So let's have a look and see if this, it looks like a narcissus in my mind. It might not be. Now if I put that bead cap into position, it's going to sit on a wonky angle and I don't quite fancy that. So let's draw that away. Let's see what else we could use. Let's go for one of these lava beads, I think. Lava being nice and hot. There we go. That looks pretty good to me, so I think I'm going to run with that. And I think maybe I'll go for black and red on this design. So as long as the bead from our beautiful Persephone mix goes onto that core wire, you can use whichever ones you want. I haven't tried these little roses yet. I suspect that they probably won't fit on. So let's try a different one. Let's go for this gorgeous barrel bead. No, I'm not sure about that. I think I might just finish off with another lava bead. Or you could go for one of these absolutely fabulous boho beads if you like. Or you could use the most gorgeous, it's almost like an Art Deco inspired bead cap. Absolutely encrusted with glitter. So let's put that final bead on for now. Slide that all the way down. I like how that looks. Black and red is an endlessly satisfying combination. Now because I'm making this as a pendant, I'm going to put my pliers across the design at the top. That's Joey saying hello to you all, pushing that wire forwards towards me, and then I'm going to make a wrapped loop up at the top. So to finish off with a wrapped loop, you can have either a plain one or a spiraled one. What we're going to do is to use our bail making pliers to create a nice round aperture up at the top. And I think I'll go for number 5 on my stepped bail makers. Just rotate that around, and I tend to start with the first half. It enables me to see if it's going to be a balanced size, and it's just a little bit easier to work with. So let's pop those bail makers back in and draw the remainder of that tail of wire all the way around, like so, before moving those out of the way. Now before we do that wrapped loop, what I'd like to do is squish that circular form. I'm not pressing where the wires cross over, I'm just giving it a little bit of residual strength so that in wear it doesn't get pulled out of shape. Once you're happy that that is sitting straight, and you might like to take a moment just to straighten that up, what we're going to do is to grip that circular form and wrap the tail around. Now I don't think I'm going to need all of this wire, so in order for the piece to stay in focus, I'm just going to move that out of the way so that I can grip across the circular form, draw that tail wire all the way around until I've filled the gap. Or you can go for a spiral if you desire. So let's have a look. Tighten that spiral up gently. We've got just over an inch of wire left to use up, so I'll pop a spiral on. If you didn't want to add a spiral, just take the wire to the back of your design, trim away and use the exact same tip and technique that I showed you for smoothing that spiral down. So this is flush cut on the end already. Let's grab some round pliers or your bail makers or indeed your memory wire pliers. So just about 3/4 of the way around that circular form before starting to push that into the non-dominant hand. And rotate, rotate, rotate until you get that spiral. Now you might notice that the spiral is currently sitting at 90 degrees to the design, and that's because it's just a little bit easier to get that spiral spiraled all the way to the middle of the core wire. Once it's sitting in position, you can decide if you want to push that up against the bail or down over the top of the bead. Either way looks quite nice. On the demonstration piece on the back, I put the spiral down underneath. So I think on this one we'll push it up towards the top. So just make sure that your spiral's centralised, and then very, very easily you can push that up with your thumb so that it sits up and over the top. If I just flip that over, the only reason I decided that that was the back of the pendant was because the spiral was on the right hand side. However, it doesn't really matter. I hope that you enjoy the Goddess Persephone collection, and I look forward to seeing you again here at Jessie James Beads.